So this is actually a 14 book haul and one graphic novel. Excuse the lighting. It's still, I haven't really figured out how I want to do it or whatnot. I'll kind of give you a brief description of each of the books, and everything in here is science fiction or fantasy, differs between adult and YA. A lot of different authors with a lot of different writing styles. I haven't read any of these as far as like from start to finish, but I did check out like the first opening pages or the first chapter to kind of get a early impression. All right, the first one is Witches Steeped in Gold. I did like the first opening pages of what I read. It was very, 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 very detailed, and it throws you right into the middle of this open world, and you know, she's riding on a creature, she's sneaking out of the castle or the palace or whatnot, and it is about a princess, I believe, whose mom, the queen, is murdering her sisters, and she's not trying to be the next one. So you find her escaping with a witch, and they end up on the run. Not entirely sure how much I will enjoy it. I'm picky when it comes to YA in general. So, next one. This is by Scott Westerfield, The Risen Kingdom, or The Risen Empire. It is a space opera. I've actually read a lot of Scott Westerfield starting in middle school, so we're talking about like 2007. That was with the Midnighters and the Uglies. This predates that. This is like 2003. I actually wasn't aware of this until recently when I was just looking through like his catalog and stuff. After reading the first chapter, I don't know exactly how much this is for me either. I think he definitely shines in writing in more of a contemporary setting, but the premise is very interesting. Humanity is at war in space with machines, and someone kidnaps, I believe, the machine princess, and kind of holds her as hostage. Like, the premise is very, very interesting, and I think once I get a little bit more into the story, maybe it'll shine a little bit more for me. But as far as the opening chapter, I was a little kind of like, you know, when you're thrown into, okay, this gadget is doing this and this is doing that, and all these new words, and just I've heard some people don't like when a story starts off directly in dialogue. I'm a little iffy when it starts off in combat. So, and it's just a preference. Goddess in the Machine. This is I don't know if you would call it a generation story, but it falls into that category, generation ship story. It's a teenage girl. She wakes up. Well, she went to sleep on the ship, then she wakes up on the planet that they were traveling to, and no one is there, or things are not how it's supposed to be. I guess you could say it's kind of like the 100. But think about, you know, where the 100 goes. They were aware when they were landing, they were going back to Earth or whatnot. Here, when she wakes up in this distant world, she does not know. It wasn't what she was promised. She doesn't know where everyone is. She doesn't know why everyone has such a warrior mentality. And a lot more time has passed than what she anticipated. Having had read the first few pages of it, I was definitely hooked. Believe it's definitely YA. The character, I believe she's 15 to 17, somewhere around there. The Memory Police, and the cover is just beautiful, like beautiful, and even more so in person. That is a story where everything is starting to slowly disappear on this island, bit by bit, and there is a police who's trying to make sure that stays the norm, and people aren't actually aware that things are disappearing, which is very, very interesting. So you're not really told why things are disappearing, but you're at least aware that there is some type of government who knows it's happening, and they're trying to keep it that way. But there's certain people who are able still to remember, and it becomes somewhat of a memory mystery, if that's a genre, I guess. But reading the opening pages, she's kind of talking with her mom as a kid, and she's telling her everything, like, okay, open this drawer and you'll see something that you don't remember or someone else doesn't remember, and I'll kind of walk you through it. So I'm assuming that her mom has this ability, and maybe she has passed it down to her daughter to be able to remember things. But it's very, very interesting. It starts off like little things are disappearing from this island. Birds, hats, ribbons. And now it's starting to get a lot more serious. I haven't gotten far into the story, but I'm assuming maybe people, which is probably not what you want to happen. So this is the Elric. Melnibone. I do not know how to pronounce it. I listened to a little bit of the audiobook to hear how to say Melnibone, but I know I'm still pronouncing it wrong. I think this was first published in like the 80s or something like that, and they recently did like a 3-book collection of each one. That's book 1. Michael Moorcock's writing style is definitely for me. I know when some people look at Lora and the stuff that's a little bit, I guess you would say, fantasy poetic in their writing style, isn't necessarily for everyone, and I understand why. But for me, I kind of like the challenge of being able to have to decipher everything that's going on. So that's definitely one that I will get to, like, without a doubt. So this is Generation 23. This is a self-published book by Ivan Ertlov. This one is definitely a generation ship story, unlike Goddess in the Machine. This one is about a chicken thief as they're traveling to their new world, and it's a mystery on who stole the chicken, and it starts to become a lot more in depth, like a huge conspiracy. And it starts off really, really simple, and the story that he's telling here has a lot of world building from just the opening chapters. More than I was expecting. Like, the people who have left Earth and they're traveling on this ship, at least I'm assuming that this developed on the ship and wasn't on Earth, but I could be wrong. They've started to develop their own type of religion and beliefs and customs and stuff like that. It's very gruesome, and I guess the way that they handle law and stuff like that, but I enjoy it. I enjoy when people do definitely take the time to create something that's very original in settings that you wouldn't expect. Alright. So, The Last God. This is, I believe, also another self-published by Jean Davis. I looked up a little into the author, and she was saying that one of her biggest inspirations was the Dune series. I've never read Dune. I watched the most recent movie, and I watched a little bit of the one from, I think it was like the 70s, with Patrick Stewart. This book, actually, from watching those movies and reading a little bit of, I think I read the first chapter, you can definitely see the resemblance and the inspiration. I lean towards this more than I did Dune, but I do think anyone who does like Dune would really like this. It does have that kind of space opera with a little bit of dark magic to it, and just like kingdoms and stuff like in space. I don't know how to describe it too much. For example, they do something similar to The Voice or whatnot in Dune, but the difference is, at least I'm assuming it's different because, once again, I've not read the Dune books. The difference is, in here, there's an actual second being in their body. So when they use their ability, it kind of awakens that second spirit. And when that spirit wakes up, they become a little bit more, I guess you can say, in charge of their body to a degree. And so it's all, whenever they use that ability, it's a struggle to make that spirit a little bit more dormant. So, contain. It's a bunker story. So, when I had picked it up, I was under the impression that it was already going to start off in the bunker. And the premise is, these people have been living in the bunker for quite a long time. They believe it's the last bunker, and then someone knocks on the door and it's like, hey, I want to take you to our bunker, and maybe we can kind of help each other out or whatnot. And they're like, whoa, there's no other bunkers, so how's that possible? So I was really gripped on it. But when I opened up the pages and it started off in pre-bunker, and I was like, not exactly what I was expecting. I don't know how much of the story is pre-bunker. Hopefully not a lot, just like a chapter or two, but we'll see. Okay. Aetherbound. Once again, similar to Generation 23, this does a really good job of building like a new world and a lot of cool world building. Really enjoy it because I know it's really difficult to do when it comes to the more space opera cinematics and scenes and stuff like that, because there's so much of it out there. Aetherbound is YA. It wasn't out of these 14, it wasn't like the one that grabbed me the most in comparison to the Elric book, but you know, it's I was glad I picked it up by the end. I know I said like I'm not a big YA person. There's like half of these are YA, but Winter, White and Wicked. It's kind of like a European fantasy modern setting kind of thing. I read a little bit of it. I think like a page or two. Did not super grab me, but I thought it, you know, it still had some potential for me as a reader. There's nothing here that I read that I was like, okay, not gonna probably finish this. So that's good. That's good. And I'm pretty sure everyone's had that time when they purchase something and it was a complete letdown, whether it was a movie or a book. I believe this one was self-published this was a couple years ago. Not all of these are recent, by the way, in case you didn't know. Ignite the Stars by Milan. This is the first book in a duology. I don't think it's YA. I want to say it's like new adult, but I'm not sure on the age of the character. It is a space opera of someone, or maybe military. Might be space opera-ish, but Space Academy, we'll say. So she's someone who's been posing as a male, and she gets arrested, and they send her to their academy. I think she's arrested by the enemy, and I think they send her to the academy to kind of convert her. And it starts off, and could be wrong, and they start off and she's traveling on a ship with civilians and stuff like that. And the dynamic that they have, or she has, with the people on the ship and the conversations, it feels very natural. And that is always a very good thing, because I think conversation and dialogue can pretty much fix a bad plot, and a bad plot can fix dialogue. But definitely for me, dialogue is a go-to, and it looks already that it has both, so that's really good. So similarly to how I said about Elric, there was a couple of these that I read and I was like, okay, out of these 14 novels, 3 of them were ones that I like outright loved. So Elric was one of them. The second one of the 3 was Blue Screen. This is far off in the future and does take place on Earth. People have all these kind of neural scans and stuff in their head, and someone finds a new drug that is supposed to be non-harmful, and it's not. And surprise, and it starts off in this team. I don't know if they're criminals or what the case is, but they're in the middle of a mission, and the action is written very well. Not a big fan of books starting off in action scenes, because you don't know what's going on, why they're doing this, and you're supposed to already be invested in the people who are dying. But this was done very well. By the time you're in like 3 or 4 pages, I at least felt invested, because you know, they're telling you, oh well, this person died and it was your fault and this mission isn't going as planned. That alone already starts to add some emotional heft to the situation, even if you're not exactly sure why they're, you know, on this mission. So, The Spearman. This is science fiction. How I would probably like pitch it to someone is like 1950s Knives Out in space. So this couple is they're on their honeymoon on a spaceship or a space station or something like that, and she's a celebrity, and they're just trying to enjoy their time, and someone gets murdered, and it's a whodunit kind of thing. I did think like the first page or two felt a little bit dismissible, but as I completed the entire first chapter, I think I did like it. He's taken his time with she's taking her time with the character development, and that's definitely something that can be appreciated. But I did think the first page was a little questionable. Like literally the first sentence you read, it's like it's an excerpt on how to make a drink, and I was like, that's really how you're. It's not like, oh, I'm making this drink or anything. It was legitimately an excerpt on a drinking recipe. So the third one of the 14 that I absolutely loved, which might be like the first one that I read of these, The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. It started off, and I read the prologue chapter and the first chapter to get a taste of it, and this entire nation they're running from something, and they land on another nation that's already inhabited, and they're losing the battle. So it doesn't actually start in the battle. It starts with the queen talking on the ship to one of her commanders or her champion or whatnot, and she's like, well, I have a solution. I just need you to hold the island. So the next chapter, he's talking with his officers and stuff, and then shit just hits the fan. Then they have to retreat. Shit hits the fan. And it's been a while since I read like that type of like combat that's introduced that quickly into the story and is that like intense and still manages to say, okay, yeah, by the way, this is what this is. This is this original piece of lore, and you don't feel overwhelmed, especially not in the heat of battle, which is not easy. It's not easy. So those are the 14 books, and this is the one graphic novel. Yeah, it's pretty big. Like, width-wise, it's like the size of like 2. But I don't know why. It's very interesting. I think it was like sponsored by Stan Lee a couple years before he passed away. Though I don't think he had much to do with like the story or anything. It's Romeo and Juliet, The War is what it's called. It's like far, far off into the future, and it's a retelling of the same story, of course, but in a very, very sci-fi thematic setting. After reading the first couple pages, the first thing that you obviously be like, well, this art is amazing. It's beautiful. It's outright beautiful. I'm curious exactly like how much it's going to focus on Romeo and Juliet, because the first thing that they tell you in the first few pages is like, oh, humanity has found a way to use nanites and stuff to replace organs and all this, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. Hopefully you're still able to maintain the gist of the story that you're trying to tell in here, and it doesn't get lost, because I think this is only like 100 pages as far as like a graphic novel goes. So, but those are it. Hopefully you like it, and I'll be doing some reviews. One of the first reviews I'll be doing is for, what is it called? Man, I'm blanking out. Warrior of Altai by Robert Jordan. I finished this recently, and I was a little mixed on it, but that'll be in a separate video. Alright, thank you. Like and subscribe and all that stuff, or don't,